Chapter 5. Desperate Guys.
And I was planning, uh, wishing, uh, how embarrassed I've been if he knew what I was thinking.
The old bus rumbled as it made its way through the pothole-ridden city streets. It was dark, but the sidewalks were still littered with partygoers, their costumes mixing with the usual assortment of quirky city fashion, backpack student garb and ratty homeless paraphernalia. The interior of the bus reflected much of the same crowd. Izuku sat near the back exit, trying his hardest not to stare at the man standing next to him. Katsuki was still on his phone. A cord attached the device to what Izuku assumed was a power bank concealed within his jacket pocket. The jacket itself was a sight to behold, and when Katsuki had grabbed it carelessly before leaving Kirishima's apartment, Izuku began to wonder what he'd gotten himself into. The thing was black leather, worn so heavily that creases were permanently folded into the arms and torso. It might have been a high-quality jacket once, back before the myriad of studs and rivets had been driven into it. Inch-long spikes protruded from the shoulders. Lesser spikes, rounded studs, and skull-shaped rivets adorned the arms, front and even collar in various groupings. The thing was so decked out in metal that Izuku was quite certain no one would be able to get close to Katsuki without risking a series of scratches and cuts. The studs must have been hand-done, judging by their imperfect spacing. The stuff Izuku saw floating through the fashion department was always more exact, more concerned with aesthetics. He wondered if it was Mina's handiwork. She did mention she had made her own Halloween costume. The jacket's most noteworthy feature, however, was the message emblazoned on the back. Izuku had noticed it when he'd followed Katsuki outside. The paint was cracked and faded in parts, but the words "Eat my F" were still plain as day, scrawled in big bold letters for all to see. Izuku had no idea what that was supposed to mean, but the overall effect was both incredibly intimidating and fascinating. He imagined he and Katsuki made a rather odd pair, him in his partial Halloween costume and Katsuki in his studded army pants, spiked jacket, and oversized skull belt buckle that unfortunately kept drawing Izuku's eyes to all the wrong places. At least the cool night air was doing him some good. The effects from Jiro's drinks were receding and the chill had woken him up. He was content to sit quietly, his cooler bag tucked under his feet. A huge bottle of Jack Daniels that Katsuki had unapologetically filched from the party took up the seat next to him, still in its brown bag. Izuku wished he had said goodbye to everyone, but he hadn't wanted to interrupt the game. Now that Izuku's mind was starting to clear though, he was becoming anxious. On one hand, he was thrilled that he was, at this very moment, hanging out with the Ground Zero. On the other hand, he had no idea how he was going to explain this to his friend. He'd debated texting him beforehand, but the guy seriously never checked his phone and there was almost no chance he'd receive it. On top of that, Izuku wasn't confident Katsuki would get along with everyone. He barely got along with his own friends by all appearances. Before Izuku had a chance to really get going, their stop came up. This is it," he said, trying not to let his voice betray his nervousness. It was too late for regrets, he'd invited Katsuki along himself, and with great enthusiasm. He'd just have to hope for the best. The silence was starting to become uncomfortable as they took the elevator up to the 14th floor. Izuku was going to have to learn how to talk to Katsuki properly, but he could barely make eye contact with him while he was wearing that jacket. As they passed a door in the hallway, Izuku paused. He pointed to another door a little further down the corridor. "That's my friend's place," he said. He glanced at the door he'd stopped at. There was a post-it note stuck to the front. "You're late," it read. Izuku grimaced and quickly tore it off. "This one's mine," he said, gesturing over his shoulder. "You want a medal or something?" Katsuki asked disinterestedly, not looking up from his phone. Izuku reddened. "No," he said, shaking his head. "But I have to run in and grab something." He hesitated. "You can come in, if you want." Katsuki didn't want. Izuku unlocked the door and dropped off his cooler bag, then grabbed a second bowl from the fridge along with a couple more bags of tortilla chips. When he emerged, Katsuki was leaning back against the wall, his hands in his pockets. "Thanks for waiting," Izuku said. He scurried down the hallway before the blonde could reply and knocked on his friend's door. Katsuki sauntered after him with no urgency. After a moment the door opened, revealing a young man in a vampire costume. He regarded Izuku impassively. "You're late," he commented, repeating his note. Izuku plastered a too wide smile on his face. "I'm really sorry," he said. "I kind of lost track of time." He hesitated, then glanced at Katsuki. "I brought someone. I hope you don't mind." Katsuki regarded Izuku's friend, his eyes narrowing. Izuku looked back at his friend only to see him doing the exact same thing. Neither of them spoke. It was more than a little unnerving. Katsuki was the one who finally broke the silence. "What, you give up halfway through?" he asked, gesturing towards his head. Izuku nearly cried out in dismay. "He can't come in," Izuku's friend said. He started to close the door. "Oh God, I'm so sorry," Izuku moaned. He stopped the door from fully shutting by wedging his foot in it. He looked at Katsuki pleadingly. "Kaken, this is my friend, Todoroki Shoto. Please don't say mean things about him." He turned back towards Shoto. "This is Bakugo Katsuki." Izuku cut himself off, realizing there was nothing he could say that wouldn't result in pissing off the blonde. A peace offering," he said timidly, holding out the bowl. Shoto's eye kept flitting back and forth between Katsuki and Izuku through the crack. He looked like he had roughly 1,000,000 questions about all this, but knowing him he'd hold off for now. "Is that your homemade guac?" Shoto asked. "Yeah," Izuku said enthusiastically, looking at his friend with a hint of desperation. "And, Kaken brought booze." Shoto eyed the bowl. "Fine," he said, opening the door wide enough to accept the gift. "You can come in." The smallest of smiles curled the corners of his lips as he turned away with his prize. Izuku breathed a sigh of relief. He stepped into the dimly lit apartment and removed his shoes neatly while Katsuki kicked off his heavy boots. A small group had gathered around a horror movie that was playing on TV, while others were seated at circular table with a couple decks of cards. A few of them looked up and called out to Izuku in greeting, shooting curious glances towards his companion, but a blue-haired man with glasses dressed as Frankenstein could be heard well above the rest. "Midoriya." Itsutinya's voice carried a scolding tone. "Are you aware that you are over 1 hour late? I regret to inform you that we've had to start without you, and you have almost no chance of catching up." He tapped on the paper tally he'd been keeping for emphasis. "I know," Izuku said quietly as he approached the table. "I'm sorry. I'll join in the next game if that's alright." "This is..." Izuku was about to introduce Katsuki, but the blonde had already wandered off. He watched in fascination as Katsuki stalked over to the television and, after shooting a critical gaze towards everyone occupying the furniture, settled onto the floor with a loud thud, causing several furtive glances his way. Katsuki shrugged out of his jacket and leaned back on his elbows, his legs sprawled out in front of him as he turned his attention back to his phone. The guy had made himself comfortable in a stranger's home in less than a minute. "I know who that is," a man dressed as a raven said. He turned his head towards Izuku, his expression a mystery behind the full face mask. "Midoriya, how do you know Ground Zero?" "Oh, you know him, Tokoyami?" Izuku asked, pulling up a chair towards the table and only wobbling a little. He couldn't help but feel a little pleased. From what he recalled, Tokoyami was into that scene himself. "I know of him," Tokoyami said cryptically. "He has a bit of a reputation, you might say." "I would also like to know about him," Todoroki said, setting Izuku's bowl of guac and tortillas on the table. He cast a glance over to Katsuki. I get the feeling that isn't a costume. He looked at Izuku dully. Are you going through your rebellious phase? No, not at all. Izuku reassured Shoto. Shoto retook his seat next to the black-haired woman dressed as a femme fatale, a vampire's bite wound painted onto her neck. Everyone at the table was looking at him now, eager for more details. Izuku considered, lowering his voice to a whisper. Remember last weekend when I told you about that band I photographed, he said quietly. He's, kind of the lead singer. He chuckled nervously. The drummer invited me to their party, and well, Kaken didn't seem to like it very much, so I invited him here. He smiled guiltily. Sorry for not warning you. Upon hearing the words band and lead singer, the entire group turned their heads in Katsuki's direction. Izuku began to panic. Don't stare at him, he hissed under his breath, trying to bring their focus back to him. He already thinks I'm a groupie. Let's just keep playing. I'll join in next round. His smile took on a forced edge. Shoto studied Izuku's face for a moment, and Izuku looked away. After a moment the man nodded curtly, picking his cards back up, and Izuku relaxed. When the current game ended, he took up a hand. After a few rounds, Izuku excused himself. He felt bad for leaving Katsuki alone like that, even though the guy seemed totally fine. He walked over to the blonde and took a cautious seat beside him on the floor. How's it going? He asked conversationally. Hang on, Katsuki grumbled, halfway through typing out a message. Izuku waited patiently. His eyes shifted to the TV but he quickly lost interest. Horror movies weren't really his thing. He preferred movies where the villains got caught and no one died. After a few minutes, Katsuki's phone buzzed. When he read the message, a victorious smirk passed over his face. "'Bout time," he said. Izuku took a chance. Good news. F yeah. Bastards finally agreed to get those shirts to us. 2 weeks maximum, took forever to get it in writing. Izuku grinned. That's great. At least Katsuki hadn't spent the whole evening on his phone for nothing. Katsuki looked at Izuku, his brow furrowed. Izuku was about to apologize for whatever he'd done wrong when the blonde suddenly sat up, crossing his legs under him. He reached his arms over his head and stretched, his back cracking loudly. Izuku tried not to notice how his arm and shoulder muscles rippled with the motion. Katsuki glanced at the TV, now playing the movie's end credits, then back at Izuku. "This all your lame-ass friends do for a party?" he demanded. Izuku was about to answer in the affirmative, but paused. He considered his options. Katsuki was looking at him expectantly. Izuku racked his brain, trying to come up with something the blonde might find interesting. "We could have a tournament," Todoroki suggested from behind them, apparently having overheard their conversation. Katsuki shot him an annoyed look while Izuku's eyes lit up. "Let's do it," he said excitedly. "I haven't played in forever." "Played what?" Izuku turned to Katsuki, all smiles. "Do you like video games?" he asked eagerly. "Todoroki has an old Nintendo 64 with Super Smash Bros." Katsuki stared at him. "Nerds," he muttered. He grabbed the big bottle of Jack from the floor and leaned forward, setting it on the table in front of the TV with a heavy thunk. Shoto made a disapproving sound. "Let's at least make it interesting." "Loser drinks," Katsuki said simply. He glanced over at Shoto. "Hey, half and half. You got something to stick shots in?" Izuku could have sworn he saw Shoto's eye twitch. "I have cups," he said, turning stiffly to retrieve them. Izuku looked at Katsuki exasperatedly. "Kaken, please don't call Todoroki names," he said. "I don't care what you call me, but leave him alone. He's one of my best friends." "Then tell him to fix his stupid hair," Katsuki retorted. It took all Izuku's strength not to smack himself in the forehead. Instead he ignored the blonde and focused on setting up the system. By the time Shoto returned with the cups, Izuku had the game ready. The introduction blared as the majority of partygoers gathered around. A mad dash for the controls and calls of dibs ensued as everyone got into the spirit of things. Observers started picking sides and cheering for friends. The winner stayed on the controls while the loser was replaced. Itza had a pretty good streak going before Katsuki's turn came around. The blonde wrecked him in a matter of seconds, drawing out a big chorus of oohs from the group. Considering that Katsuki had called them all nerds, it was surprising that he was so good at this. Was he good at everything he did? Izuku watched as partygoer after partygoer failed to beat Katsuki, using the opportunity to study the blonde's moves. When his turn came around, he settled on the couch next to him. "I can't believe you picked Samus," he commented mildly. "What?" Katsuki sneered, his eyes on the screen. "You got a problem with girls?" "No," Izuku said. "I guess I thought you'd go for Fox or something." Fox, Katsuki said as the game started. "Have you seen this badass arm cannon? Shoots missiles and everything. Plus I can bomb the hell out of whoever I want. I think you just like blowing things up." Damn, Katsuki was really good. Izuku was starting to suspect that he had played this before. "I'll blow you up, Captain D-Head," Katsuki said as he wasted Izuku's character. Izuku groaned. "Captain Falcon is awesome," he corrected. He cringed as he poured himself a shot's worth of whiskey. So much for sobering up. Izuku downed it, grimacing over the strong alcoholic taste. "How are you so good at this? How are you so bad at this?" Katsuki jeered. "Let me try," Shoto interjected. He cracked his knuckles. "It's my game, after all." He gave Katsuki a look that might have passed for competitive. Katsuki glared at him fiercely. "Bring it." The brawl wasn't like the others. The whole room went deathly quiet as they prayed for someone to bring Katsuki down. Everyone cheered when Shoto finally blasted Katsuki's character out of the arena. Katsuki was fuming. "I want a rematch," he declared as he poured and downed his shot. "Effing bastard, I'll kill you next time." Shoto looked at Izuku impassively. "Your friend is a sore loser," he said. Katsuki's eyes bulged out of his skull. Izuku only laughed. "Kaken, let someone else have a turn," he said. "You can beat him next time." Katsuki growled but rose from the couch. He poured another couple shots worth of whiskey into his cup then sat back down on the ground beside Izuku. Grumbling aside, the blonde did wait fairly patiently, handling a few other things on his phone until it was his turn again. When Katsuki came back, it was with a vengeance. If anything, the break had only fueled his competitiveness, and after a second-long battle Katsuki wasted Shoto. The whole room cheered again. Everyone had taken at least a couple shots and the huge bottle was approaching half empty. "Best of three," Katsuki grunted, and Shoto nodded wordlessly. Katsuki wasted him again, and the cheering wasn't quite so loud this time. Izuku noticed that a crazed grin had spread over the blonde's face upon that last victory. It was a little disturbing. After that, things started to break apart. No one wanted to fight Katsuki anymore, so Izuku and Katsuki ended up going at it game after game. Izuku was determined to figure out a way to beat Katsuki, which was unfortunately becoming exponentially harder as he took his second, third, then fourth losses. "Kmen Deku, you're making this boring for me," Katsuki sneered as Izuku painfully downed another shot. "I'm gonna beat you," Izuku said determinedly, squinting at the screen. After his fifth loss, he decided to try a different tactic. Soon after the start of round 6, Izuku glanced over to where Katsuki's phone was lying ignored. "What's that sound?" he asked suddenly. It was a lame attempt, but in the half-second Katsuki spent glancing at the device, Izuku wrecked Katsuki's character. When the blonde turned back to him, his eyes furious, Izuku could only laugh helplessly. "You little cheater!" Katsuki screeched, standing up and balling his hands into fists. Izuku, who had downed 5 shots in fairly rapid succession, laughed and laughed and laughed. "Kakakin," he wheezed. "Lemme have this one win." "F you," Katsuki said as he took a long swig straight from the bottle. "I hate to kill the mood," Shoto said, appearing behind the couch with the black-haired femme fatale, "but please leave. Momo and I want to sleep at some point tonight." Izuku twisted his head around. The whole place was empty save for the 4 of them, and it looked like it had been that way for a while. "Sorry, Todoroki," Izuku managed, grinning sloppily at his friend. "I didn't realize everyone had left." Katsuki huffed. Still holding the bottle, he went to grab his jacket off the floor. Shoto looked at Izuku, a slight crease in his brow. As Katsuki trudged out into the hallway, Shoto glanced at Momo. Seeming to get the hint, she retreated into the bedroom. Shoto lowered his voice. "Midoriya," he said, choosing his words carefully. "Who is that guy, exactly?" Izuku tilted his head in confusion. "A musician." Shoto shook his head. "No, I mean, what is he to you?" He inclined his head. "You were, really getting into it there. Plus, the nicknames are," he trailed off. "Oh." A flush rose to Izuku's face. "Weird," Izuku hesitated. "We barely know each other." Shoto stared at Izuku like he was trying to read his mind. "Is it, like that?" he asked. Izuku bit his lip. This was an embarrassing conversation, but Shoto was one of the few people who Izuku had trusted with his secret. "Maybe," he said. "I mean, no. I don't know." Izuku buried his face in his hands. Shoto studied Izuku silently, then reached out and touched his shoulder. "I think you're drunk," he assessed. Izuku groaned. "Don't do anything stupid, all right?" "I won't," Izuku reassured him, fully intending to follow his friend's advice. However, after bidding Shoto good night and stepping into the hallway, Izuku only saw Katsuki's retreating back. The words he'd uttered moments ago were instantaneously forgotten. "Don't leave," Izuku thought, and he stumbled after the figure. "Kakin," he called out. "Wait." Katsuki paused, swiveling his head. "What?" he grumbled. Izuku caught up to him, nearly tripping over his own feet when he came to a stop. What should he say? Izuku's common sense said to let Katsuki go. Izuku's emotions, spurred on by alcohol, said to get him to stay. He said, fumbling. "The photographs. Right. I been working on editing more photos from your show, plus the other one we went to." This much was true. "Since you're already here, could I get your opinion on them? I could use another set of eyes." He looked at Katsuki imploringly. The blonde narrowed his eyes distrustfully. "Please," Izuku said, and the blonde released a burdened sigh. "Frick, whatever, why the hell not," Katsuki said, raising the bottle to his lips and sucking on it like the thing was filled with water. Izuku's spirits soared. "Thank you so much," he said earnestly, heading back to his apartment. He had to try a couple times before he successfully managed to unlock the door. Everything was a little out of focus. "What the, this place is tiny," Katsuki said as he entered the apartment. He looked around the bachelor judgmentally. "Why's yours so much smaller?" Izuku was too busy having a minor heart attack over Katsuki physically being in his apartment to notice the blonde's tone. He went over to his desk to turn his computer on and tried to calm his nerves. Well, Todoroki's family is pretty well off," he said slowly. "Plus I think he gets some money for his PhD studies." He smiled a little. "We went to the same college. We were roommates in first year." Katsuki snorted. Didn't ask for his life story, Deku. Right, Izuku mumbled, squinting at the screen as he stood over his desk. You can sit if you want, Izuku said, gesturing towards his desk chair. I'll stand. Izuku decided to let it go. While he was waiting for the images to load, he took his bloodied costume shirt off and stuffed it under his desk, then sat down himself. He was wearing a basic green t-shirt underneath. In the meantime, Katsuki wandered around the small apartment, pausing by Izuku's bookshelf. It was mostly packed full of comic books, but there were also some photography books as well as old college textbooks. Katsuki pulled a few out from various locations, and Izuku felt the heat rise to his cheeks. You really are a nerd, Katsuki said, opening an All Might comic book from the 1990s. With all this crap, I'm surprised you don't have the platinum editions. Izuku wasn't the swooning type, but if he had been, Katsuki's words would have sent him straight to the floor. You read the All Might comics, he said faintly. Katsuki eyed Izuku. Yeah, he said. When I was 5. You know about the platinum editions. Who the hell doesn't? A stupid grin spread over Izuku's face, and judging from Katsuki's expression, it was pissing him off. He turned back to his computer, trying to fight the smile off. Here, Izuku said. I got it all up now. Taking another swig from the bottle, Katsuki moved closer, bending over to get a better look at the screen. Izuku stumbled brokenly through some of his thoughts regarding composition and technique while trying to ignore the blonde's closeness. Katsuki remained silent, his sharp gaze focused. After a while he stopped Izuku. That one, he said purposefully, indicating a photograph from the metal show. There's too much empty space at the top and left. If you took it in, it wouldn't look so crappy. Izuku wasn't sure he appreciated the language being used towards his photographs, but he performed a rudimentary crop, and damn it all, if it didn't look better. Geez, he said appreciatively. Is there anything you aren't good at? Katsuki stared at him, then smacked him upside the head. Don't be so weird, groupie. Ow, Izuku complained, rubbing his head. He looked at Katsuki with a hurt expression. What's your deal with groupies anyways? Aren't they just fans? Crazy fans, Katsuki corrected. Fans who'll stalk you and break into your effing place, steal your crap. Izuku startled. Is that what happened? Why? Katsuki sneered. You taking notes? Izuku ran a hand through his hair thoughtfully. I'd like to understand why you've been acting so suspicious, he admitted. Katsuki deliberated. He dumped his jacket on top of Izuku's bed, then sat down on the floor, rotating the bottle between his hands. You really want to know? Izuku nodded so forcefully that he almost fell off his chair. Thinking it probably safer, he moved to the ground. Jiro had told Izuku not to press them, so he didn't say anything else. Katsuki scowled at the floor. I ain't telling you the worst of it, he said. That's none of your damn business. He paused to take a drink. Being in a band, you attract a lot of attention. Some of it comes from backrap crazy people. Izuku nodded again, that much was understandable. Katsuki continued. 'Bout a year ago, one of our shows got a little wild. Some a-hole threw a bottle, hit me in the face, broke my effing nose. Made a real mess. He glared at Izuku when he made a sympathetic noise. Shut it, idiot. He shook his head. The day after, this blonde chick shows up and starts following me around. Thought I saw her at a few shows, so I didn't care much till she turned up in my apartment. Dunno how she got the address, but I get home from work one day and there she is in my goddamn kitchen, holding one of my knives. Spouted some crazy bullcrap about how I looked good covered in blood. She tried to come at me, so I knocked her the F out. Izuku was gaping. He didn't even know where to begin. She did what? He yelped, his eyes wide. You did what? Why didn't you call the... One look from Katsuki was all it took to shut Izuku up. Call the cops. Katsuki scoffed. Know how quick that would have turned on me? She barely looked legal. He growled. I knocked her out, dropped her outside a women's shelter and booked it. Changed all the locks on my place. This was already a whole lot worse than Izuku could have imagined. Oh my god, he said, his mind reeling. I can't even imagine. I ain't done, Katsuki snapped. You said you wanted to know, right? Izuku clamped his jaw shut. Katsuki pinched the bridge of his nose and exhaled slowly. While she was in my place she must have hacked my computer and gone through all my stuff, because she got her hands on all my personal info. Phone numbers, credit card numbers, passwords, she even stole some unfinished tracks, leaked everything online. I had to close all my accounts, change numbers, had to move. Katsuki raised the bottle to his lips and drank, his hand gripping the bottle a little too tightly. The stolen tracks were the worst, he muttered. They were useless after that, had to scrap 'em all. Took us months to get back to where we were. Haven't seen her since, and it's a damned good thing for her. That's horrible, Izuku said, utterly shaken. I can't believe someone would do that. Fucking bitch. Izuku tried to wrap his mind around what Katsuki had told him. He couldn't help but think that the blonde was being overly pessimistic in regards to the police. If he'd called them, then maybe they could have arrested her and stopped her from leaking everything. Maybe the physical confrontation could have been avoided too, although Izuku supposed that was easy enough to say when you weren't being rushed with a knife. I think I understand why you don't keep a personal number now, Izuku said slowly. I dunno if I'd want to either after that. He remembered how the band had even kept their business cards on the down low. Katsuki shrugged. Less distractions are better for the band, he said. All that social bullcrap is a waste of time anyways. Let Pinkface handle it. Izuku wasn't sure if he could condone Katsuki's actions, but the mess that girl had caused was undoubtedly terrible. If this wasn't the worst of it, as Katsuki had said, Izuku wasn't sure he wanted to know the rest. The blonde had hinted that someone may have tried to get close to the band at one point, and Jiro had told him not to mention anything to Mina. That was enough for Izuku to not want to speculate further. I'm sorry that happened to you, Izuku said sincerely. Jesus, what is with you? Katsuki gave him a perturbed look. Don't apologize for crap that has nothing to do with you. Still. Izuku gave Katsuki a small smile. If it makes you feel any better, I don't have time for any of that. I'm too busy with my own stuff to stalk anyone. Katsuki set the bottle down on the floor. The photography crap, he said simply, his gaze a little unfocused. Izuku wondered how much liquor Katsuki had consumed. The contents were starting to get low. Yeah, Izuku agreed. I wanna push that a lot harder on my own now. I've pretty much given up on my job giving me any opportunities. Where do you work anyways? Izuku straightened up a little. He was pretty sure that was the first real question Katsuki had ever asked him. The Beat, Izuku replied. Fashion department. Katsuki's face contorted, and if Izuku didn't know better he'd say the blonde was withholding laughter. F me, Katsuki said, staring at the ceiling. It's not that bad. Izuku started to say, then stopped. He brought his knees up to his chest and ran his hands down his face. Oh, who am I kidding, he moaned. It's awful. I hate it. I hate it so much. Katsuki wordlessly shoved the bottle of Jack in his direction. Izuku grabbed it and took an over-enthusiastic gulp, coughing a little. I mean, how many photos of shoes do you need? He cried out, waving the bottle in the air. The colors of the season are black, then orange, then pink, then black again. It never ends. Katsuki watched Izuku, a strange expression on his face. He turned his head away, pressing a fist against his mouth. Izuku rocked gently, cradling the bottle in his arms. This isn't what I pictured myself doing, he muttered. Katsuki turned his gaze back towards him. He didn't say anything, but his eyes seemed to be prompting Izuku. I dunno, Izuku said, raising the bottle to his lips again. It didn't really taste alcoholic anymore. You're just gonna laugh at me. Try me, Katsuki said. Izuku tried to gather his thoughts. Ever since I was a kid I wanted to do something that would help people, he said, his eyes unfocused. Something good for the world. When I went to college, I thought I'd become a photojournalist. I want to be sent on special assignments, work on current issues, travel to other countries, maybe even go to war-torn areas. You know, bring more attention to important causes. He dropped his forehead onto his knees. I thought if I could get in somewhere like the Beat, I could move into the events section and work my way up to something bigger. But no one will give me the time of day. It's been really frustrating. He looked at Katsuki. I still want to do it, though. So what's stopping you? Katsuki said. Izuku frowned. Money, I guess, he said. I need a paying job. Katsuki grabbed the bottle back from Izuku. Money comes from anywhere, he retorted. You're the dumbass offering everyone free work. He took a swig. Are you talking about Rick? Izuku said. Because I really need the exposure. Shut the F up, Katsuki said, though it wasn't with his usual venom. Know what exposure gets you? F and all. Our band'd be nowhere if we jumped on every bullcrap opportunity for exposure. That D-bag dick is screwing you and you're the stupid a-hole who's letting it happen. Katsuki's words were abrasive but there was a spark of truth in them. I already agreed though, Izuku said. The next time something comes up, next time people gonna know you work for free, stupid. I didn't see you sign a contract. Katsuki raised the bottle again. I don't give a f what you do. But you wanna help people or whatever, you're never gonna do it from down here. Izuku realized that Katsuki was actually making some really good points. Wow, I think you're right, he said numbly, rethinking his whole perspective on the matter. Course I'm right, Katsuki grumbled. The hell do you think I've been doing with the band this whole damn time? Izuku smiled, a warmth blooming in his chest. Thanks for the advice, Kikin. It means a lot. Ain't advice really, Katsuki muttered. Izuku let go of his knees then took the bottle back from Katsuki. He scooted a little closer so he could lean against the bed. It was getting hard to sit up on his own and the room was starting to turn. What about you? He asked, sipping on the liquor. You must have big plans for TH Band. Katsuki let his head flop back, a sloppy grin carving his face. Damn right I do, he slurred. He cocked an eyebrow towards Izuku. We're gonna be the #1 punk band of our generation, Dip Dip. Gonna climb the stupid system, then tear it all down. Izuku didn't really understand, but Katsuki's words sounded impressive. Tear it all down, he repeated, chuckling. Kinda like what you do with buildings, ha. Don't laugh, crappy Deku. Katsuki snapped. The world is messed up. Everyone's pissed off but too lazy or stupid to do anything about it. Katsuki splayed his arms out in front of him like he was conducting an orchestra. The idiots need direction, he said fiercely. A call to action. Get 'em rioting, get 'em speaking up. Izuku stared at Katsuki in newfound wonder. You wanna change the world? I can do it, Katsuki said casually, swiping the bottle back. I'm sure you can, Izuku said admiringly. If anyone can do it, I'm sure it's you. You're really amazing. Katsuki paused, eyeing Izuku as he took a long swig from the bottle. Yeah well, guess you ain't such a normie after all, he muttered. Izuku beamed. We have a lot more in common than I first thought, he said happily. We have nothing in common, crap nerd. Oh, I dunno about that, Izuku murmured. I'm gonna work a lot harder now. So hard that even you'll have to be impressed. Ain't gonna happen. Izuku laughed, his head tilted towards Katsuki as he appreciated the blonde through his bleary vision. He was happy that Katsuki was the way he was. They both wanted to change things, to help people, in their own ways. His eyes drifted over Katsuki's form, resting once again on that half-hidden tattoo. You're staring at me again, Katsuki said, his speech slow and lazy. Why do you keep staring at me? Izuku's eyes went back to Katsuki's face. Oh. I was looking at your tattoo. Looks like it says something but I can't read it. Katsuki's eyes flashed dangerously. If Izuku had been sober he'd have been as red as a beet. You wanna see it? He asked. Yeah, Izuku breathed. Katsuki leaned towards Izuku. He grabbed his tank at the center and pulled it down far enough to fully expose the letters. There were 2 rows of them stretching in a semicircle from collarbone to collarbone. Izuku found it very hard not to appreciate the extra skin Katsuki was showing him and tried to focus on the words. Aut viam inveniam aut facium, he said, butchering the pronunciation. It's Latin. It's Hannibal, Katsuki said, releasing his shirt. I will either find a way or make one. That's really cool, Izuku said. Is that your philosophy or something? More or less, Katsuki said. Got it 4 years back, when we decided we were gonna go all in. Izuku grinned, resting his head on his hands. You're so dedicated. Duh. Making it is all that matters, so of course I'm dedicated. Izuku hummed thoughtfully. Katsuki squinted at Izuku. You think that's cool? Wait till you see my other one. Show me. Izuku was not expecting the blonde to turn his back to him and take off his tank, but that's exactly what happened. His heart nearly stopped when he got an eyeful of the waves of rippling muscle that bulged along Katsuki's back. He became so distracted that he almost missed the tattoo completely, an impressive feat considering its size. Huge flaming dragon wings began at the center of Katsuki's back, exploding up and outward over his shoulder blades. Oh, wow, Izuku croaked, his voice betraying himself. Katsuki shot him a strange look over his shoulder. He put his tank back on, much to Izuku's disappointment. Sake, Deku. I can't tell if you're drunk or hitting on me, he muttered. I'm not that drunk, Izuku slurred. Moments later he realized what he'd just inferred and found himself unable to care. He'd lost count of how many drinks he'd had a long time ago. You're really handsome. He grinned. You're a goddamn wreck, Katsuki said, though the shift in his posture seemed to indicate at least a mild degree of flattery. Thought you were into girls. Am into both. Understanding passed behind Katsuki's foggy eyes. Figures you're one of those half-assers, he grumbled. He grabbed the bottle and, finding it empty, set it down again. Izuku might have been offended if Katsuki's word choice hadn't given him pause. A half-asser. Someone who couldn't commit the full way. A suspicion. Izuku tilted his head and gazed at Katsuki inquiringly. And you're not, he asked. Katsuki looked at Izuku knowingly, but he answered anyways. Of course not, he snapped. Think I'd half-ass anything? You're supposed to figure that crap out in grade school. No way. Izuku stared at Katsuki, and Katsuki stared back, looking like he was ready for a fight. All the decisions that Izuku had made earlier that week were immediately disregarded. His friend's warning was long forgotten. Izuku had an attractive, talented, passionate, gay musician alone in his apartment. A guy with a heroic streak. A guy with just as much ambition as himself. A guy who was knowledgeable about his favorite comic book hero. Izuku started to lean forward before he'd even realized it. Katsuki stopped Izuku by putting a hand to his chest. What, why think cause I like guys I'm in OU, he sneered. No, Izuku said, gazing blearily into Katsuki's fiery eyes, dull with drink. I just kinda hoped. He could feel the warmth of Katsuki's hand burning through his shirt like a wildfire. Katsuki seemed taken aback. You're drunk, he slurred. Sorry you. Katsuki grunted. I ain't lookin' to date or whatever. It was true that Katsuki had a lot going on with his band. He'd made it very clear to Izuku exactly what his priorities were. But Izuku's priorities right then and there were focused solely on the blonde. The room had fallen away around them, Katsuki's crimson gaze the only thing he saw. The distance between their bodies felt like an ocean, Katsuki's hand a physical manifestation of the disconnect between their minds. Izuku wanted to close that space. And so, he made a decision. He lied. That's fine, Izuku slurred. He reached out, his fingers messily tracing the edge of Katsuki's jaw. It was rough with late-night stubble and that drove him wild. Neither am I. Izuku leaned in further, placing one of his hands over Katsuki's, and pressed their lips together. Nothing happened for a while. Izuku was starting to think he'd made a horrible mistake when Katsuki relaxed and dropped his hand from Izuku's chest. Izuku kissed him more insistently then, and after a moment, Katsuki returned it. Izuku had kissed a guy exactly once before. He'd been curious in college and his friend had been as well, which had led to a very brief make-out session in their shared room. Things had gotten weird after that until they mutually decided to forget it had ever happened for the sake of their friendship. This was nothing like that. When Katsuki returned the kiss, a heavy warmth flooded Izuku's body. He could feel a series of dull tremors travel down from his mouth and take root at the base of his spine. Despite the heat, he shivered. He moved closer and brought a hand to the side of Katsuki's strong, thick neck. It was a lazy, drunken kiss, slow and deliberate, and it was so good. Izuku sighed. He felt a smirk pressed against his lips before Katsuki tugged on his lower lip gently, and Izuku gasped. This was amazing. Katsuki was amazing. The blonde's hot breath tickled his sensitive lips, his mouth tasting of alcohol and spices. When Katsuki pushed his tongue past Izuku's teeth and into his mouth, the whole room began to tilt. Izuku's hands traveled up into Katsuki's hair before they started moving downward. He traced the edge of the blonde's collarbone as their lips pressed, pulled, tugged, nipped at each other. He could feel a familiar heat rising in his gut as Katsuki's hand moved to grip his curls. The sensation moved southward and was joined by another while blood began to pool. Everything felt very far away all of a sudden. The last thing Izuku remembered was wondering how far he could take this before the floor gave away completely underneath him and everything went black. When Izuku came to, he was lying on the floor in a strange position. Splayed out on his side, one of Izuku's hands was jammed up under his cheek and his knee had been bent forward. Disoriented, he sat up and his stomach lurched violently. He scrambled on all fours over to his desk, barely making it to the wastebasket before emptying the contents of his stomach into it. His head splitting, Izuku groaned loudly. The room shifted around him. Was he still drunk? Once he trusted himself to move, Izuku forced himself over to the bathroom. He popped some painkillers and cupped his hands to drink from the sink before he slogged back to his bed. He collapsed on top of it, passing out again immediately. When he came around for the second time it was mid-afternoon. Izuku groggily sat up, taking it slowly. His stomach shifted unpleasantly but settled after a moment. The events of the previous night slowly came trickling back through his receding headache and he moaned pitifully. Izuku flopped backwards onto the bed and almost threw up again. He covered his face with his hands as he squirmed in embarrassment. What had come over him? He never drank that much, ever. What must Katsuki think? Had he really passed out on him? Just thinking about that possibility made Izuku want to crawl into a hole and never come out. Izuku forced himself upright again, groaning as his stomach protested. He felt like he'd been hit by a truck. He staggered over to the door, whimpering when he realized it had been left unlocked all night. Izuku pulled the chain across and turned the lock. He'd take a shower first, then figure the rest out. The hot water provided much relief, and he came out a short while later feeling revived enough to take out the trash and attempt to eat something. As he munched on some plain toast in his desk chair, Izuku tapped his finger against his knee anxiously. What had happened after he'd passed out? Katsuki must have left. There was no trace of him to be found in the apartment other than the empty bottle still lying on the ground. Had he gotten home all right? He'd had significantly more to drink than Izuku, although he looked like he could take it better. Izuku leaned his forehead against the desk and groaned. Todoroki had warned him not to do anything stupid. Yet despite everything, he couldn't bring himself to regret the events of last night, at least not entirely. Izuku spent the next several hours picking up his phone and setting it down again, then walking over to his mirror and criticizing his appearance. He was toned, but slender. Too slender, in his opinion. He really ought to work out more if he wanted to. He shook his head. Wait, no. He was getting ahead of himself. Still, a gym membership couldn't hurt, could it? It was early evening when Izuku finally worked up the courage to text Katsuki. Picking up the band's business card, he rotated it in his hands, deliberating nervously. Eventually he decided on a simple message. Hey, hope you managed to get home all right last night. Katsuki didn't take long to reply. What the F? Is this Deku? Don't text me on my business line, idiot. Izuku frowned. You said you don't have a personal number. A pause. Yeah, so don't send me personal messages. Better yet, don't send me any messages. Izuku hadn't known what to expect, but he knew what he'd hoped for, and it wasn't this. He sighed, dejected. Katsuki was mad, wasn't he? Sorry for passing out on you. Katsuki's reply stung him. Stop. Effing. Texting. Me. I don't know what you think happened last night, but it sure as hell ain't happening again. That's what you said you wanted, right? This isn't your personal line to try and chat me up, so f*** off. Izuku leaned back and ran his hands through his hair. He had said that, hadn't he? That was the most infuriating part. He'd decided not to let himself get taken in by a musician, and then he'd gone out of his way to try and make something happen. Part of him felt guilty for deceiving Katsuki, but the other part was upset with the blonde over the sheer rudeness of his messages. Was everything that had happened last night so meaningless? Feeling uncharacteristically petty, Izuku responded. Fine. Sorry to bother you. It's not like I was interested anyways. That was the second lie he told Katsuki. Izuku tossed his phone onto his desk, then slunk over to his bed and lay on it face down. At least he could put it all behind him now.